Today I'm going to attempt to drive the Bugatti Veyron I bought for the very first time, but clearly I can't drive it like this. The reason this car is in two halves is because it's got a gearbox problem. In the last video we received it back, and finally after 5 months, hopefully it's fixed.
The engineer who designed this gearbox had not touched one in years. Then his phone rang. Mark McCann's $1.2 million Bugatti Veyron came apart.
Today I'm going to expose the Bugatti part scammer who conned me out of thousands of pounds. Yep, embarrassingly, I have been scammed.
With a transmission Bugatti refused to repair, quoting $600,000 just to replace it. Rather than pay, McCann's team found Rob Barnes, the retired Ricardo engineer behind the Veyron's original gearbox design, and a Dutch specialist willing to attempt a $27,000 rebuild instead. Barnes had one serious warning about what could go wrong. Ahead, the purchase, the standoff, the warning, and the moment the engine fired. Stay through it, like this video, subscribe, and tell us if you think it worked. The $1 million gamble. $1.2 million is a serious sum of money for a working hypercar. It is an entirely different kind of number for one that cannot move under its own power. That was the deal Mark McCann agreed to when he bought this particular Bugatti Veyron. Not through a public listing, not through a dealer, but through connections inside the supercar world that put him in front of a car most collectors never even knew existed. The Veyron itself carried a history worth pausing on before any of the damage even enters the picture. It began life as a standard production car, before German tuning house Mansory transformed it in 2008 into a pur sang-style build, adding more than $440,000 in custom bodywork and carbon fiber components. Before it ever reached McCann, the car belonged to a member of a Middle Eastern royal family, the kind of ownership history that usually comes with meticulous care, not 3 years of disassembly across 2 separate garages with nobody able to put it back together. Is buying a car in this condition a calculated risk? Or is it closer to a bet placed with a blindfold on? McCann had seen enough hypercars to know what he was looking at. What he could not know, not fully, was what 3 years of sitting in pieces had actually done to the car underneath the bodywork. The damage list, once the car was properly inspected, went well beyond a single broken part. The gearbox was completely non-functional, unable to properly engage reverse even before the car was taken apart. Timing problems surfaced. Hardware was missing entirely, presumably lost somewhere across the 2 garages the car had passed through. Aluminum body panels were damaged. The interior was deteriorating from years of neglect. And in a detail that summed up the entire situation, some of what looked like carbon fiber bodywork turned out, on closer inspection, to be vinyl wrap in poor condition. A cosmetic illusion sitting on top of a mechanical disaster. None of that was the real problem, though. The real problem was sitting inside the transmission housing, and it was about to turn a difficult restoration into a genuine financial standoff with the one company that actually knew how to fix it. Could anyone have looked at this car, in this condition, and still called the purchase a rational decision? To understand why McCann took this gamble at all, it helps to understand what he was walking away from just to attempt it. This is not a collector buying his first serious car. McCann's existing collection is valued at around $13 million.
I'm Mark McCann, I'm an off-road champion and a full-time idiot. Today I'm going to share with you my full 54 car collection.
Including a $1.6 million McLaren P1. Cars that run, that drive, that require none of the uncertainty this Veyron was about to introduce into his garage. He also brings a competitive background rarely seen among hypercar collectors, having raced professionally as a stock kart and side-by-side UTV champion, which means he understands mechanical risk in a way that goes beyond simply writing checks for repairs. That background may explain a decision that, on paper, looks reckless. A collector with no mechanical instincts of his own might have walked away the moment he learned what the car actually needed. McCann instead saw a machine that could still be saved, provided someone was willing to spend the time and take the financial risk that Bugatti itself was clearly not interested in taking on. What makes this particular gamble different from a typical restoration story is the scale of everything involved. This was never a weekend project or a modest side hustle. Every decision from this point forward would be measured in tens of thousands of dollars, sometimes hundreds of thousands, against a car that, even fully restored, would carry the permanent asterisk of having spent years in pieces before anyone managed to put it back together. There is also a simpler explanation worth considering alongside the financial one. Hypercar restoration content had, by this point, become one of the most reliably compelling formats for automotive audiences online. A genre built on the tension between enormous cost, genuine mechanical risk, and the emotional payoff of watching something broken become whole again. McCann understood that dynamic as well as anyone in the space. A car this damaged, carrying this much history, was never simply a personal project. It was also, from the very first phone call, the foundation for a story worth documenting in full. The gearbox Bugatti refused to repair. Every hypercar restoration eventually runs into a wall, and for McCann's Veyron, that wall had a name: the gearbox. Bugatti built the Veyron's transmission as a sealed unit, engineered to handle the violent torque of a quad-turbocharged 16-cylinder engine.
The Bugatti's W16 engine. Okay, this one has 8 liters, 16 cylinders, quad turbos.
Dealership technicians are not equipped, and are not permitted, to open that unit and rebuild its internal components. There is only one official path when something goes wrong inside it: replace the entire assembly. That single fact turned a bad situation into a potentially catastrophic one. A full factory replacement gearbox runs anywhere from $200,000 to $375,000, depending on the version required. Layered on top of the car's other damage, panels, interior, missing hardware, the total repair bill climbed toward an estimated $600,000, half the price of the car itself, just to make it functional again. Would any owner, having already spent over $1 million, simply write a check for another $600,000 without asking a single question? McCann did not. He spent weeks trying to get real answers directly from Bugatti about the gearbox, hoping to learn whether the sealed unit policy truly allowed no flexibility for a customer with a serious problem and a serious budget. What came back was closer to silence than an answer. No alternative to the full replacement quote, and no urgency to solve a problem that already had an official solution on the price list. For a company built on exclusivity and control over its own vehicles, the sealed unit policy is not an oversight. It is the business model. That left McCann with a choice most Veyron owners never face: pay the six-figure sum and stay inside Bugatti's system, guaranteed result and price, or step outside it entirely and risk destroying the transmission for good. He chose the second option, starting with a phone call to the Netherlands. Understanding why Bugatti holds this line so firmly means understanding what the Veyron is under the bodywork. Its transmission manages the output of a 16-cylinder engine capable of pushing the car past 250 miles per hour. Forces most gearboxes were never designed to survive. The sealed unit policy reflects a genuine engineering reality. Get the rebuild wrong, and the consequences at those speeds are not cosmetic. That explains full replacements over field repairs. It does not explain why a customer with a car worth over $1 million, willing to pay for a proper repair, could not get a single specialist on the phone to even discuss the problem. Bugatti's brand identity rests on control over who builds these cars, who touches them, and who gets to say they worked on one. A sealed gearbox only Bugatti can open generates six-figure invoices every time an owner needs a repair the company alone may perform. And for most Veyron owners, that is exactly what happens. McCann's willingness to pursue an independent solution instead put him in unfamiliar territory for the brand. A customer able to pay Bugatti's price, choosing to risk months and real financial exposure, proving the policy was not the only path forward. The $27,000 bet. If Bugatti would not open the gearbox, someone else would have to. McCann's team tracked down a transmission specialist in the Netherlands with the technical background to actually inspect the sealed unit rather than simply replace it outright. What they found inside was not good news exactly, but it was not the worst-case scenario either. The specialist discovered metal swarf, fine metallic debris, blocking the gearbox's hydraulic channels, along with significant wear on the clutch plates. That combination explained the transmission's failure to engage reverse gear. But crucially, the damage looked survivable. Rather than requiring a full replacement, the specialist believed the unit could potentially be salvaged through deep cleaning and targeted repair work, at an estimated cost of around $27,000. $27,000 against a factory quote that started at $200,000 and could climb towards $600,000 for the full repair bill. Is that even a real choice? Or is it simply the obvious move dressed up as a gamble? On paper, yes. The math is not close. But the $27,000 estimate came with no guarantee attached. Salvaging a decades-old, ultra-high-performance sealed transmission is not a routine repair job. If the cleaning and rebuild failed, McCann would likely be right back where he started, except now down $27,000 and with a transmission in worse condition than before the attempt. The restoration itself was entrusted to Furlongers, a specialist shop whose reputation with Bugattis runs deep enough that its service stamps carry weight comparable to an official Bugatti service center, without the constraints and without the six-figure invoice that come with actually being one. That distinction mattered enormously here. McCann needed a shop with genuine Bugatti-level expertise, willing to take on a job the manufacturer itself had effectively declined. What the Dutch inspection could not fully answer was whether cleaning out the swarf and repairing the clutch would actually hold up under real driving conditions once the car was reassembled. That answer would require expertise nobody on the team currently had. Expertise that, remarkably, still existed, if they could find the right person. There is a version of this story where the $27,000 estimate turns out to be wishful thinking. A specialist, eager for the work, underselling the difficulty of the job to land the contract. That risk was real, and McCann's team could not simply take the number at face value. Before committing, they pushed for a detailed breakdown of exactly what the repair would involve, what could go wrong at each stage, and what the fallback plan looked like if the cleaning process failed to fully resolve the contamination inside the hydraulic channels. What made the decision easier, in the end, was the shop taking on the actual work. Furlongers had built its reputation over years of Bugatti-specific projects, the kind of specialist credibility that does not come from a single successful repair, but from a track record other owners in the same small, ultra-wealthy community had already trusted with their own cars. That reputation mattered more than any single estimate, because it meant someone with genuine expertise was willing to stake that reputation on this specific transmission. Still, reputation is not a guarantee. Every hour spent working inside that sealed gearbox was an hour where a mistake could turn a salvageable transmission into scrap metal, converting a $27,000 bet into a total loss on top of whatever Bugatti would eventually charge to finish the job properly. That tension, expert confidence against genuine uncertainty, sat behind every step of the rebuild from this point forward. How do you actually price a repair nobody has attempted successfully before? The $27,000 figure was an estimate built on experience with similar transmissions, not a guarantee specific to this exact gearbox and its exact history of damage. Every additional hour of labor, every unexpected complication discovered once the unit was fully opened, carried the potential to push that number higher, though even a repair costing 2 or 3 times the original estimate would still land far below Bugatti's 6-figure replacement quote. The man who designed the Veyron's gearbox. Every complex machine has an origin point, a place where the fundamental design decisions were made decades before the finished product ever reached a customer. For the Bugatti Veyron's gearbox,
It's been a long time coming getting this gearbox back next to this beautiful car, and as you've all seen, it's not been smooth sailing.
that origin point was Ricardo, the British engineering firm responsible for designing the transmission from the ground up. And remarkably, McCann's team managed to connect with Rob Barnes, a former Ricardo engineer who had worked directly on that original design. What Barnes told them changed the entire calculation. The gearbox, he explained, was never simply a set of gears bolted together. It was a complex hydraulic system, and new clutch plates specifically undergo something called a bedding-in process after installation, a period where microscopic carbon fibers shed from the clutch surface as it settles into use. In Bugatti's own factory setting, specialized filters on a dedicated test rig catch those shedding fibers before they can cause any damage. McCann's team did not have a factory test rig. Without that filtration step, Barnes warned, the outcome would be swift and specific. The shed carbon fibers would clog the transmission's hydraulic valves, cutting off the flow of cooling oil to the clutch. Once that cooling stopped, the newly repaired clutch would be thermally destroyed in under a minute of actual driving, undoing the entire $27,000 repair in less time than it takes to drive around a parking lot. Is there a more brutal kind of engineering problem than one where the fix itself creates the exact failure it was meant to prevent? The team now faced a second challenge, stacked directly on top of the first. Rebuild the gearbox, and then solve a filtration problem that Bugatti's own factory needed specialized equipment to manage. Rather than attempting to source factory filtration equipment that likely did not exist outside Bugatti's own facilities, the team turned to custom manufacturing. Using CAD drawings, they began replicating bespoke clutch plates and gaskets no longer available through any official channel. Parts engineered specifically to route around the exact failure Barnes had just described. It was, in effect, an attempt to solve a problem Bugatti's factory needed millions of dollars of infrastructure to manage, using a fraction of that budget and considerably more improvisation. Barnes's involvement changed more than just the technical approach. It gave the team access to institutional knowledge that, by this point, exists almost nowhere outside Bugatti's own walls. The Veyron's gearbox was engineered decades ago by a small team of specialists, many of whom have since retired or moved on to other projects entirely. Every year that passes makes that knowledge harder to access, which means McCann's team was not simply solving a mechanical problem. They were racing against the slow disappearance of the very expertise that made a repair like this possible at all. That context raises a genuinely uncomfortable question about hypercars like this one. If the handful of engineers who understood the original design are aging out of the industry, what happens to cars like the Veyron a decade from now, when even a determined owner with the resources for custom manufacturing cannot find anyone left who remembers how the original system was actually built? McCann's rebuild, in that light, is not just about one car. It is a test case for whether independent, informed repair can keep pace with a manufacturer's shrinking willingness to support vehicles once they are out of warranty. How many other hypercars sitting in garages right now with similar sealed unit failures will never get the version of this story where someone tracks down the original engineer? McCann's team got fortunate finding Barnes at all. The custom parts, once manufactured, still had to be tested against the exact failure mode he had warned about. There was no way to simulate the bedding-in process on a bench with complete confidence. The real test would only come once the gearbox was fully reassembled and the engine actually turned over. The moment of truth. 3-5. Months of work led to a single moment nobody could rush. After the gearbox rebuild, the drivetrain had to be fully reassembled, contaminated systems flushed clean, and the cooling circuits pressure tested to confirm there were no leaks before anyone dared start the engine. Every one of those steps carried its own risk of undoing the progress that came before it. A car nicknamed the Spaghetti Veyron by those following the rebuild, a reference to just how long it had spent scattered in pieces, was finally whole again, at least on paper. Then came the moment the entire series had been building toward. The team turned the key. Would months of custom manufactured parts and borrowed expertise actually hold, or was Barnes's warning about to prove itself right in the worst possible way? The engine fired. There was an initial misfire, one still under investigation, but nothing that stopped what came next. Hydraulic pressure built successfully through the rebuilt gearbox. No major leaks appeared anywhere in the system. With the team watching, visibly tense, the transmission selected first gear, and the Veyron rolled forward under its own power, for the first time since the entire project began. Forward was not the real test, though. Forward had never been the problem. The fault that had disabled this car for years, the one that started this entire $27,000 gamble in the first place, was reverse gear. Reverse engaged. Clean, functional, exactly as intended. The single fault that had made this car worthless to Bugatti's own service department, the fault that carried a six-figure official price tag to fix, had been solved for a fraction of that cost, using a Dutch specialist, a retired Ricardo engineer, and custom-manufactured parts that do not officially exist anywhere in Bugatti's own catalog. There is a temptation, at a moment like this, to treat the story as finished. The car runs. The bet paid off. But anyone who has followed a hypercar rebuild this far knows the difference between a car that moves and a car that is actually finished, tested, and ready to be trusted at speed. The misfire noted during startup still needs proper diagnosis. The custom clutch components, however carefully engineered, have not yet been proven across the kind of extended driving that would fully validate Barnes's original warning about thermal failure. Every milestone in this rebuild has been followed by another one, and there is no reason to assume this is the last of them. What is different about this particular milestone is what it represents, rather than what it guarantees. For years, this specific fault, reverse gear refusing to engage, sat at the center of every setback in this rebuild. It was the reason Bugatti quoted a full replacement instead of a repair. It was the reason the Dutch specialist's estimate carried so much uncertainty. And now, it is solved. Whatever challenges remain between this moment and a fully finished car, the single hardest problem in the entire project has been cleared. What began as a phone call Bugatti never fully returned ended, months later, with a car doing something Bugatti's own service department had effectively declared impossible without a six-figure replacement. That gap between what the manufacturer was willing to offer and what an independent team actually delivered is the real story sitting underneath every number in this rebuild. What remains unresolved is timing. Trax Silverstone, one of the UK's major car shows, has been planning for this Veyron to appear on its retail stand on August 16th, potentially the car's first public reveal since the rebuild began. Whether the car will actually be ready by then is still an open question. The gearbox works, the car runs, it moves forward and backward for the first time in years. Whether it makes it to Silverstone in one piece is a different story entirely, one still being written. Bugatti said this transmission could not be repaired. A retired engineer and a Dutch specialist just proved otherwise. The engine fired, first gear engaged, then reverse. The fault that had disabled this car for years finally worked. $27,000 solved what Bugatti quoted at $600,000. What remains unresolved is whether this Veyron is ready for its debut at Silverstone in August, or whether the misfire and the untested clutch have one more chapter left. The gearbox held, the bet paid off. If this changed how you see what it takes to save a hypercar Bugatti gave up on, hit like, subscribe, and tell us if you think it makes the show.